Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tech Talk on remote testing to commission systems and equipment. My name is Nicole Gardner, and I will be the moderator for today's session. Please note that throughout the Tech Talk, all phone lines will be muted. This will minimize any background noise or feedback that could distract from the presentation. When you first joined the Tech Talk, an attendee control panel appeared on the right side of your desktop. On the left side of this control panel is a small tab with an arrow icon at the top. Pressing this icon allows you to minimize and maximize the control panel. When maximized, you can use the control panel to submit questions. We will be gathering your questions throughout the Tech Talk and will leave a little time at the end for Q&A. If your question is related to a particular slide, please include the number of that slide in your question. A PDF of the slides from today's presentation will be sent electronically to all of those who are registered for today's Tech Talk. We will also be recording this Tech Talk, and it will be available on our website under the Resources section. There is a password to access the Tech Talks, and it will be emailed to all members after this presentation. Today's presenter is John Penny. John Penny is the president of JFP Consulting Services and specializes in commissioning, HVAC, plumbing, and fire protection engineering. He is a graduate of Vermont Technical College and has almost 40 years of experience in mechanical engineering and commissioning. John has spoken on energy and sustainability in buildings and commissioning at several conferences across the country. He has taught HVAC, plumbing, and construction management for the Vermont Center for Business and Industry at Vermont Technical College. John has been actively commissioning buildings for 18 years and has commissioned over 4 million square feet for more than 120 projects. He is also an international board member of the BCA. Welcome, John.
Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today I'm going to talk about some of the changes that have occurred to us in the construction industry, primarily commissioning, relative to this coronavirus. We've had to make some big changes in the way we access the job site, in the way we might communicate with the contractor, and things of that nature. And when the coronavirus first hit, I had 5 elderly housing projects in construction, and every one of them had a job shutdown, as most of you probably saw with just about any project across the United States. 4 of mine were nursing homes, and they immediately shut down, and trying to commission things that were under construction either got delayed or there were special circumstances in which to access the site, never mind being able to do testing on site. So today I thought I would talk a little bit about some of the things we've had to adjust at our company, and maybe just open the door to a lot of discussion where many of you have had to shift gears, make adjustments, all kinds of things to manage the projects under this different environment. So today I want to talk a little bit about what has really changed. Scoping and coordination meetings. There's been a big change in that, in the sense that just about all of us are doing things online now, and we're using different kinds of medium to do that. We've probably all had to make subtle changes in our commissioning plan, looking for different efforts maybe from the contractor, and we'll go into a couple of those things. How we access the site and our site visits. It's pretty tough to avoid site visits. As a commissioning person, you have to get your eyes on the construction, and there are things that we can do to do it remotely. I'm going to talk about a few of those, but what I found a little bit with the site visits, you're pretty much to yourself if it's a new construction site and you don't have to encounter too many people. But then again, you probably have all kinds of different experiences. Many people have projects that are occupied. Although over the past 3 months, a lot of buildings have been at least sparsely occupied. Performance testing, I'm going to talk a little bit about that and any kind of pre-performance testing that may be able to be done remotely. And I'm going to give you an example of how we've been able to do a little bit of that. Training is another aspect where usually it's a group that gets together on site and you need to go to all the pieces of equipment. Well, maybe there's a combination of both on-site and online, remote training that people have started to do. We've certainly started to do it. So just simply talking about meetings and managing your commissioning meetings, most all of them are online nowadays, and it's easy enough to do. All the contractors, the engineering group, the architect, certainly the commissioning people are using some online meeting services such as GoToMeeting or Team. Zoom is a popular one. I've even been working on a Google type. I think probably some people have even used FaceTime for just doing some video chatting. I think what's important when you're trying to do stuff online is that you have one that allows you to share the screen and share documents, either by camera or at least the documents that you need to work with. We've been doing that pretty much all along, but it's the type of thing where we get into these new technological ways of doing our business, and we find that actually it's a better way of doing things. One of the things that's important about the online meetings, or at least the service that you use, is that it has a recording capability. And that's worked out quite well for me in the sense that, when I do get online and communicate with these people and have to do meeting notes or record some of the data, we can record the online meeting and I can always go back and take a look at it. When you're on site, communications is really important. There are certain sites that may not have Wi-Fi available, and in some cases it might not even have communications to a cell tower. Those start to become a little bit more difficult as far as trying to do online stuff and be on site. But generally speaking, I think just about every job that I've got at the moment, we do have communications on site, either by cell tower through our phones or through our connections through our phones to our computers, which has been working out pretty well. I've also found that through all of this, I've got a little bit better time management. I'm actually getting a lot more done by not having to drive to these sites sometimes. I get more time online and working with the contractor than driving 2 hours or spending 3 hours or 4 hours on the road a day just to go to a site and return to the office. So I found that my time management has worked out a lot better. Adjustments to the CX plan. Well, there was no question that I had to make some adjustments to get contractors on board with some of this communication stuff that we needed to deal with. And scoping meetings, we can easily do those via some sort of online service. I tend to use GoToMeeting and Teams most of the time. Both of those programs allow screen sharing, and most people can download the software or be connected for free. They don't really need to purchase anything, which is really nice. Site construction observations. It's pretty difficult not to visit the site. I have found that I can send some younger members of the company with their laptop or with their phone, and as they're going through the site, we can communicate and they can put it on video and we can look at things together. When it comes to site observations or even sending any kind of personnel out to the site, I guess now we've got to consider who we can send out to the site. Sometimes some of the senior members of our companies may have a situation where they would be more vulnerable to our coronavirus situation than, say, a younger member of the group. Maybe not as much experience, but with communications with a person on site and being able to communicate online, that works out pretty slick. Checklist confirmation. Oftentimes we have to go to the site after we receive our checklists and make sure that construction has been as they say it has been through the checklist process. Again, this is another way in which we could send out someone to the site with communications via phone or computer and video, and be able to walk through the site if particular individuals can't. One of the things I found really very beneficial about this, especially using GoToMeeting, is being able to communicate with the engineer. I've on several occasions been able to get him to jump on the GoToMeeting right away and then discuss as a group of people what the situation is on site and get his input right away, which has been one of the little lights at the end of the tunnel here that I thought was pretty good. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. Startup and pre-test control checkouts. I found this to be really good using communications. I can't tell you how many times I went to the site for a startup and I'm hanging around for 3 hours while they're fixing all this stuff before they can even get the equipment up and running. I've had more time wasted at startups than I think on anything at the job site, and I'm sure that you've run into some of that yourself. Pre-test control checkouts, I found it invaluable to be able to communicate with the controls contractor via screen sharing, look at a live version of the front end of the BMS, and start to walk through the systems with that, with the controls contractor, and actually start to jot down a bunch of notes on all of the things that are not in the sequence of operation, but need to be in the functional performance test. Speaking of the functional performance test, I find it difficult not to be on site for the functional performance test, but at the same time, if you've spent enough time with site construction observations, you've done the pre-test control checkout, and you might have somebody on site that can actually do some of the calibration testing just to confirm that things were calibrated. There's an awful lot you can do through a GoToMeeting or web service setup and record that as well. Training is another excellent way to use the online program. In fact, it's one way to get more people to the training. You still probably need to have somebody on site that can walk around with a camera, but it certainly saves in having too many people on site and being able to meet some of the other protocols that might be set by the state, which we'll talk about too. Managing the on-site construction. Obviously, we work in different states. Each of the states has specific guidelines. I found up here in the Northeast that they don't vary too much, but we all in all, we need to pay attention to that. In addition to the state guidelines, there may be specifics that the general contractor requires of the site or the owner if it's a job site that is occupied. Personnel, you may have some changes in what type of personnel that you send to the job site. I mentioned earlier about younger people and other employees that might be susceptible to contracting the virus or being affected heavily by the virus. So those are considerations as an employer that you need to be aware of. personal protective equipment, masks, gloves, eye protection, maybe a shield, depending where you're going to be and who you're going to be working with. It was funny when I put this picture into this slide, I was thinking right away, boy, we can't do this anymore. So, these are how we used to meet before. The number of people on site are somewhat reduced, or you try to reduce them anyways, as far as commissioning is concerned. Most of the time, whenever I was on site, I was with a member of a general contractor who was in charge of commissioning, probably the superintendent for the mechanical contractor, then the controls contractor. You might even been meeting with the balancing contractor at the same time. Well, now we're trying to work things out that if we can do things online, we can reduce the number of people on site and maybe get more people involved if we need to. And as I mentioned, including the engineer. So when I put down here technical tools, I was thinking of, the types of computers and connections, communications on site that we can regularly or and I've had a great deal of difficulty with my IP on occasion, and it might be because of the overloads on the internet, but trying to maintain communication on the job site may sometimes be difficult. I know if you're trying to use Wi-Fi, there might be some limitations, but if you're using cell tower and connections in that way, they tend to be a little bit more reliable and probably the best way to connect on site. So you've got your computers, you've got your phones, and mostly I think people are using the tablets, which have the cameras front and back, and you can continue to switch back and forth and be able to communicate and show video of the site and things that might be going on, especially when we talk about startups and confirming checklists and things of that nature. Again, it goes without saying, social distancing is important. It's all part of that personal protection. Even though we're wearing masks, we try to still maintain social distancing. And I think just about every state that I've encountered, at least up in the Northeast, requires the social distancing for people that gather. In fact, I think it's in Maine and New Hampshire that they're limiting gatherings to no more than 10 people. So those are some of the other aspects. So I talked a little bit about field observations and ways that we can do that, having a person on site, or even the contractor for that matter, who might have a connection and can be on a meeting or team or some of the other Zoom programs that are out there, and you can actually communicate and see what everyone is looking at, point out things. Again, I don't think it's a total way in which you can conduct yourself on site commissioning. I think you do have to make those job site visits, but where you've got repetitive equipment that's going in on a regular basis, getting those first few pieces down on site, usually the rest might be able to be handled via video. Checklists, obviously those are up to the contractor to fill out. As a commissioning person, I always like to follow up and randomly check several of these places that they say that the checklist has been fulfilled. This is something that may be possible to do online, or at least with another individual from the company, rather than sending too many out. Startup and control system checks. I find that these work pretty good. Again, I've had a lot of wasted time by going to startups and standing around for hours while things needed to be adjusted. It's best that they contact you when they're ready to do it, and you can do it via video, and it works out pretty slick. Control system checks, I think they've worked out the best, because half the time you're standing there on site looking over the shoulder of the controls contractor while you're trying to observe the front end, unless you are allowed access to it. But then again, with the online services software, you can look at it in real time. You can always see the screen right in front of you, and you can communicate with the controls contractor, and that works out pretty slick. Functional performance testing, similar to the control system checks. I think there's still some field testing that requires equipment on site, checking calibrations, observing some of the operations that you might not be able to get a camera into. Those are important things that still need to be checked out on site. But there is a certain amount that may be able to be done via online video services. And again, we talked about training. So I'm trying to move through here. We're into it about 20 minutes. I've got a short video to talk about, but and I've been sort of skipping back and forth. Pre-test and functional performance tests, communications equipment, software and access for participants. Again, I've run into contractors that don't have a lot of savvy technical people oftentimes on site. That might be a reason why it needs to be written into the commissioning plan to have those type of people that are capable of doing that. I find that the project managers for the mechanical contractor usually all have that capability. I've run into several superintendents on site that are not even fond of getting email, never mind trying to use their phone for doing a video chat and the like. You want to be familiar with using the BMS. I think just about all commissioning people that I know are pretty familiar with that, and certainly familiar with several different companies out there of BMS, Honeywell, Johnson, Automated Logic, Andover, Schneider, all of those. Everybody has to be a little savvy when it comes to finding their way through that software on occasion. That way, another aspect of using the BMS with the controls contractor via some sort of web service, you can get him to do all the direction, and you just have to sit there and watch the screen. And again, I'm going to share with you an example of that. Access to documents and submittals. I think we're probably doing this on site now. I can't tell you how many times I brought up a submittal on my phone on site, or just the drawings to check a particular detail or part of the plan. If we're doing it remotely, and we're sharing screens, this is an easy thing to do. And then the other neat part again is to invite other participants if you need to. And again, I had a situation with an engineer at a nursing home, VA nursing home for that matter, and I was working with the controls contractor via one of the web services, and we were having trouble with one of his sequences, and it was just not working. And many times have I tried to have separate discussion with engineers about problems I've had with sequence. Well, the fact that I was able to call him, get him right online with us, and he could see it live, made all the difference in the world. He could actually see where we were having the difficulties, and used our suggestions, me and the controls contractor's suggestions for getting it out of an unstable situation, for which ended up being a change in the sequence, and everybody ended up being relatively happy after that. So what I have for you today is an example of a project that I was in the midst of doing a pre-control checkout, and I recorded it so I could share it with you today, and I'm going to start that right now, and we'll maybe watch about 5 minutes or so of it, and maybe it'll even raise a few questions.
So our outside air temperature, you said, was 69.9. I see. Yep. As our air comes in, looks like it's going through the wheel. I don't see that the dampers are open to bypass the wheel. Are they supposed to be open?
It doesn't call for it to be open, but our outside air humidity is pretty high too. It's at 90%.
Okay, so we're going to go through the wheel even when we're not in economizer then.
That's right, yeah.
Okay. I wonder if that's reasonable. Do you always go through the wheel when we have bypass dampers and
Well, we would only in the event that we're not economizing and it doesn't seem advantageous to use the wheel. So there's a series of conditions that would turn the wheel on and off based on whether they want to heat or cool reclaim. And then another series of conditions whether we're going to want to economize. And I'm guessing we're not going to economize based on that high humidity.
No, we wouldn't economize necessarily at this temperature. However, if there's no need for the wheel to run because we're below the set point temperature, it seems to me that you would normally have some sort of a stop jog feature, so you're not loading up the
well, we do.
wheel. And that's going to run whenever the wheel is set to be off?
For X number of minutes. I think it's 10 minutes. I can open the code if you want to take a look at it.
Yeah, let's take a quick look at the code.
So, if the wheel is off for 30 minutes, then we jog it
for
5 minutes.
For 5 minutes. Okay. Good.
So I can tell you it's been off for 7. So we would need to wait a little bit to see that.
Okay. All right. Good. So we're seeing that our pre-coil temperature is 67.5. Our outside temperature is showing something a little bit more, but where's the sensor for outside? Is it in a different location?
Yeah, there's a common outside air sensor that Kendall uses for all their.
So this is just a tidbit of the kind of thing that I have been doing on a regular basis now with the controls contractor to do a pre-test of the controls, because there's so many things that the engineer doesn't write down in his sequence that certainly need to be tested. In this particular case, I was a little concerned that the wheel wasn't running, and why go through the wheel if we can go through the bypass dampers? There would be less static pressure on the system and maybe save a little bit of energy. So eventually I started to make some changes for this system, or make recommendations to the engineer for some changes. So this video goes on for about a half an hour, and we walk through all aspects of the system on what was beginning to be a relatively cool day, moving into a relatively hot day. So we got started early in the morning, and again, you're getting the idea. So if we talk about training, again, would have a scoping meeting easily done online. We can review the overall training plan, get all of that stuff together without having to meet on site. Those are easy things that we can do. We can pre-review the operations and maintenance manuals. I've used online meeting to discuss what might be proper for the O&M manual with the contractor prior to them putting them together. And then once it's together, if I have some comments, I like to be with them online and talk about it. The way maintenance information sort of comes to the contractor sometimes, depending on the type of equipment, sometimes it doesn't look so good, but that's all that's available from the manufacturer. So those are good ways to find out about some of that stuff without trading emails back and forth or written documents because you are concerned about one thing or another. On-site trainees and trainers, you can limit the number of people on site and allow them to watch the training via online, and that's worked out pretty well. In the past, I've been on training sites with way more than 10 people, and I'm not sure that very many people can get in to see what they need to see oftentimes. And if you're only on site with a few people and a camera, and that camera can get right into the area, people can certainly get a better training by watching it. Not to mention the fact that all of these programs have recording capability, which is really nice. My little recording just a minute ago is a good example of how it comes out. And record keeping as well. I mean, these little videos that you put together, they can all become part of that systems manual or part of the O&M manual, depending where you want to assemble it, and be able to give people a very nice presentation and good information going forward into the future, especially with facilities people who change hands all the time. It'd be nice if they could just pop up a little video of what the training was like, versus having to go through the manual and somewhat figure it out for themselves on occasion. But some people are pretty sharp like that, and they just prefer to do it that way. So again, it's here it is, a half hour. I've got time for questions. Again, I was just trying to present a simple approach to using the online video services or online meeting services to help assist in commissioning. And I have to admit that after having started doing this because of the coronavirus, there are certain aspects I think it's going to be a permanent part of the way I work. It certainly gives me a better way to manage my time. So with that, I'll leave you to questions. And I guess, Nicole, I don't know whether you're receiving those questions or.
I am, and it looks like I have a couple for you. The first is referring to slide 4, and the question is, how often do you typically visit the site? Is it weekly, monthly, and has that changed due to COVID?
Well, it certainly has changed due to COVID, and I try to get better communications with the contractor, because when he has questions in the past, I used to go to the job site depending on where it was. If it was close, I'd probably scoot right over there. If it was a long ways away, I would plan trips to those sites. And it's all a matter of how you propose the job. It seems like every time I propose a commissioning job, they're always looking for ways to cut back on your service. At the same time, we have pretty strong feelings as commissioning people that we have to be able to perform a certain amount of on-site service or part of our process where we can't cut back too much. But I have been able to see more often with the online service than I did trying to make trips to the site. Oftentimes when you make trips to the site, you can't always schedule around when that equipment is going to be ready to look at it. And if you've got the contractor on board with the whole commissioning process, he's quick to give you a call and say, hey, you want to take a look at something with me? And I found that that's been one of the things that's been working out really great. So in some senses, I feel like I'm getting more eyes on the site versus making the trip out to the site all the time. So it is a matter of money, and you can only plan so many trips to the site. We tend to take more online time, and you can get actually more eyes on the project. So hope that answers the question.
Thanks, John. Next question is your on-site sub or commissioning provider Zooming the BMS screen direct to your office? How are you able to access that?
Well, I've been using GoToMeeting, but Zoom is exactly the same. You can set up a meeting instantly for people to connect, but there's a number of ways to do it. You can do it with Teams. We've done it with Teams as well. All my staff at my office, we use Teams inter-office, and we're still not on full-time here at the office either. We're working out of the house still part-time, but we're connected all the time via Teams, and everybody's got it on their phone, everybody's got it on their desktop, And I can get a hold of people from my office no matter where they are. Just click on them and call them, and we can have a video chat. If they're on site, they can use the video and bring up the question and show me what's going on the site. So that's been really beneficial to be able to use that communications.
Great. Our next question, can you comment or outline the commissioning activities that do require on-site collaboration between several trades?
Well, I would say that's up to the commissioning company themselves. Me personally, I feel like I absolutely have to see the equipment installed right around the time they're ready to finish their checklists. At least the first few pieces, if there are multiple pieces going into a particular project. For instance, if a VAV box with a reheat coil was being put into a project, I might want to see that first one and make sure that all the others, after a discussion with the contractor, are going to be repeated in this particular way. Or if we had questions and changes and collaboration with the engineer about one aspect of it, we want that to be repeated through the project. So I find that whenever the initial pieces of equipment are put in, air handler, fan coil, a VAV, even baseboard radiation or some other terminal piece of equipment, I think getting that first one under your belt and seeing it in real life is the way to first do that work. When it comes down to functional testing, you have to be on site to a certain amount, or at least have people on site that can show you the test results of checking calibrations and the operations of certain aspects of the equipment and some of those tests. You should be able to view a lot of those right online. I mean, look at how great some of these TechTalks have been. We've seen some pretty good examples of video on-site testing that I would say that if there were a number of people on site, you probably saw it better on the TechTalk than you would if you were there in real life. So there's some really great aspects to doing it video and recording it for that matter.
And who's the one who is running around with the camera on site when you're looking at things during startups, and et cetera?
Well, this is the great part. It can really be just about anybody who has a phone or some sort of a tablet. Oftentimes I like to send, at least initially, someone from the office to the site with a particular task in mind. And then we just communicate via online. At the same time, it works with the contractor too. You can call the contractor at a particular time and say, hey, I just got this submittal. There's something supposed to be on this air handler. I wonder if you could give me a call back when you're up there at the air handler, and we'll communicate via Teams. I'd like to give the video over to you, and I'd like you to show me this area of the air handler and what we're talking about. Open the door, and and you can do that really slick without having to go to the site. And again, I like to try and get this into my plan and get the contractor on board right away. And you'd be surprised that once you have that kind of communication with a contractor, they're actually giving you a heads up more often. And again, this has really just been happening for the most part for at least our company over the past 3 months, 3 or 4 months. And we've all had to make these changes, and I'm finding some real benefit to this approach. So.
And have you received any pushback from contractors to participate in the online remote testing?
I haven't as yet. They're trying to follow the protocols of the site as well. In fact, I find people who are really on board are the general contractors who have a commissioning person who's designated to the project commissioning, and they'll be the ones with the camera that'll go out there with the mechanical contractor and go to the site with that person. I have to admit, going to the site during construction usually isn't a problem for me as far as encountering people on the site, especially in a new project. I was out at a job site about 3 weeks ago and spent the entire day going through the project. I think I had communication with one person. And it was really only to let them know that I was going to be on site and going through the equipment. It was in the early stages of rough-in, so there weren't a lot of questions that I had at the moment, but it was certainly at a time during the construction that you could see everything, the piping runs and things of that nature. So there has to be a time that you need to make it on site. You just can't see everything through a video camera, but boy, has it really enhanced the way I've been able to have more eyes on site by using the video approach.
Definitely. So for projects that require plane travel, do you think that 100% remote testing is feasible if you can utilize the general contractor or sub labor for point-to-point?
Well, that would have to be a decision by the commissioning company. If you were doing just fan coil units, I would say that you could probably feel relatively comfortable with doing it that way. If you were doing a complex air handler, even as complex as the one I just had in the video, which was really just a heat recovery air handler that was serving a nursing home, there were enough things going on that I really needed to go on site to view that equipment. In that particular piece of equipment, I had a lot of trouble with the calibration of some of the sensors. And there were some different aspects of the way the air was going through the equipment where it was picking up heat or wasn't calculating outright as far as the amount of mixed air. So there were some things that I needed to be able to do on site to confirm what I was looking at. But there is an awful lot you can do via the video with more, I'll say, more standard terminal pieces of equipment that are relatively simple sequences.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that we're learning to work from a distance, there's less wasted time in traveling and being able to work from home more often. Do you think that eventually it will affect the fees required to perform the commissioning process as part of a project?
That's a good question. You know, I haven't changed my fees because of it, but then again, just about all these projects that I've been working on were proposed and accepted prior to the coronavirus. So, you know, I haven't found that I've been putting more time into the project because it's been a trade-off on the amount of travel. Again, I still have traveled to the site, but I find that I don't have to travel as much. So that trade-off has actually given me more time on the job. Especially the one project I was talking about that I was at a couple of weeks ago, that's a 2.5-hour drive from my office. So there's 5 hours of travel in one day just to go to that one job site. I'm able to communicate with the contractor on site, and he's able to go to a particular area and we can discuss it over a video. You know, being able to see it through his phone or through his computer. So that's been quite beneficial.
And when you're talking with them over the phone or the computer, have you had any backlash of recording the meetings from a liability point of view?
I haven't. I haven't at all. I'm only using it for notes right now. I guess you always have, well, first off, whatever service you're using, it tells the people on the other end that it's being recorded. So they would know that it's being recorded. But I always tell them ahead of time, do you mind if I record this? I'm just going to use it for my notes. And I don't necessarily hold on to the videos, but it's always probably a good idea to let people know that they're going to be recorded, or at least ask them if they mind being recorded. I don't know if there's a liability for that. Maybe there is one. I think in some states, about recording, I think it's only if you're recording without their knowledge. But again, I'm not up on the liability side of these kinds of recordings.
Okay. And are you comfortable having the sub physically conduct tests and witnessing via remote access?
Again, it depends on the pieces of equipment. It depends on the sub. I've worked with so many contractors over the years. There's some that I can absolutely trust. And it's mostly the controls contractors that I feel like I need the trust from. They're the guys that need to make it work. They're the ones that are trying to avoid the callbacks. When it comes to problems on the job or in the mechanical systems, I'll say, it's usually the controls contractor that's the first one that somebody calls. So I think the controls contractors are very much on board with making sure that things are working properly. And several times I've called them up and said, hey, I heard that this particular aspect of this air handler is doing something funny. Can you go online? Let's get an online meeting. I want to see a trend log of that piece of equipment. Let's see what's going on. And that's been really nice. Although sometimes I do have access to some of these BMS systems after the projects are over. Some of my clients give me access and I can go in and do the trend log myself. But both ways are good approaches to troubleshooting and making sure that everything is operating as it should.
Great. Well, I think that's going to wrap up our questions for today. Thank you, John. We really appreciate your time and expertise. Just a few announcements. Don't forget to sign up for the 2020 BCA Annual Virtual Conference starting next Monday, July 27th, with the free opening plenary. You can find all conference details on our website. On behalf of the BCA, I'd like to thank everybody for your participation in today's Tech Talk, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.